My presentation is on Soren Kierkegaard. He was born May 5th, 1813 in Copenhagen, Denmark. He was the youngest of 7 children and often considered himself a child of old age because his mother was 45 and his father 56 when he was born. In 1830, he went to study theology, philosophy, and literature at the University of Copenhagen. He lived in Denmark his whole life. He only traveled abroad a handful of times, mostly to Berlin. Mostly just stayed in Copenhagen. He was engaged to Regine Olsen in 1840, but broke it off in 1841. She was only 18 at the time of their engagement, and she got married a few years later, actually, in 1847. His writings can be divided up into 7 main categories or eras, if you will. D. Anthony Storm did this, and he compiled kind of a commentary on all of Kierkegaard's works. The first one is his works of youth from about 1834 to 1842. And these are just some of his early publications, including his dissertation. Next is the indirect communication from about 1843 to 1846. Kierkegaard considered his authorship to have started in 1843, even though he had already published his dissertation and a few articles. Under pseudonyms, because he wanted readers to think for themselves and decide where they stood on various issues instead of just relying on the author's authority. In 1845, a man by the name of Peter Miller published an article that indirectly criticized Kierkegaard's stages on life's way. Miller was also a contributor and editor for the Corsair, a satirical paper that made fun of pretty much everyone noteworthy. Kierkegaard wrote these 2 pieces as a sort of sarcastic response to Miller. This next era, the prelude to the second authorship, is just that. It's a prelude. This time was slow compared to some of the other years, but things picked up in about 1848, which leads us to the direct communication era. During this time, Kierkegaard began to candidly attack the church and Christendom. The Lutheran Church was the established state religion in Denmark. When you were born Lutheran and were thus automatically considered Christian. And so it rather did away with the principle of conversion to Christianity. Kierkegaard felt that official Christianity or Christendom had departed from the Christianity of the New Testament, and that it needed to be rebuilt, not just reformed. Kierkegaard felt that he was doing his duty in attacking the complacency of Christendom. An excerpt from his journals illustrates how he felt as the attacker. It says, "Imagine a big, well-trained, obedient hunting dog. He accompanies his master on a visit to a family where, as all too often in our time, there is a whole assembly of ill-behaved ewes. Their eyes hardly light upon the hound before they begin to maltreat it in every kind of way. The hound, which was well trained, as these ewes were not, fixes his eye at once upon his master to ascertain from his expression what he expects him to do. And he understands the glance to mean that he is to put up with all the ill treatment, accept it indeed as though it were sheer kindness conferred upon him. Thereupon the ewes, of course, become still more rough, and finally they agreed that it must be a prodigiously stupid dog which puts up with everything. The dog, meanwhile, is concerned only about one thing, what the master's glance commands him to do. And lo, that glance is suddenly altered. It signifies, and the hound understands it at once, use your strength. That instant, with a single leap, he has seized the biggest lout and thrown him to the ground. And now no one stops him, except the master's glance. And the same instant, he is as he was a moment before. Just so with me." Kierkegaard considered himself a Christian theologian, He concentrated most of his efforts in that direction, and he felt like that was his biggest achievement. So why is he called the father of existentialism? Kierkegaard believed that it was the individual that was responsible for giving meaning to life. Also in keeping with the philosophy of existentialism, he held that human existence cannot be explained or comprehended by scientific or moral thinking alone. Both of these were needed, but another element was also needed, that of authenticity. Authenticity can best be described as finding oneself and then being true to oneself. Coming back to his theological argument, people must be converted to Christianity, not simply born into it. Existentialism gained popularity after World War II, but Kierkegaard is considered the first existential philosopher. So, how is this pertinent to education? Well, Kierkegaard focused much of his work on Christian theology, but the principles that form his groundwork are applicable to education. The importance of the individual and the belief that it's the individual that gives meaning to life, not society as a whole. And existentialism philosophy in the classroom would be focused on each student as an individual in an effort to help them find themselves. While all may not completely agree with this philosophy in the classroom, it is an important philosophy to understand and be familiar with.